Helena Petrovna Blavatsky. You've probably heard that name somewhere. An enigmatic figure accused of charlatanism, surrounded by controversies and unanswered mysteries. A woman who dared to reveal the greatest secrets of the powerful and of secret societies at a time when sexism and ignorance reigned. Women couldn't even vote. Yet Blavatsky, driven by the same questions we still ask today, where do we come from? Where are we going? Why are we here? Had a purpose, and she followed it until her last day. And you're going to want to watch this story from beginning to end. I've separated this video into chapters to make your learning easier, so remember to save it to a playlist for future research. I'm Gabriel Alexandre, and you're on the Esoterica Mind channel. Please hit like and share this video on your social networks, in groups, and with friends. Your support is essential for this content to gain traction on YouTube. Before we begin, I want to hear from you. Do you believe some people really came to Earth with a secret spiritual mission? Comment now. There is no religion higher than truth, if that line resonates with your soul. And get ready, because the story you're about to hear challenges time, logic, and power. On a stormy night, August 12, 1831, in the city of Ekaterinoslav, in the heart of Ukraine, then part of the Russian Empire, a child was born who would defy every convention of her era and leave an indelible mark on the spiritual history of the West. Helena Petrovna Hahn von Rottenstern came into the world under circumstances that seemed to foreshadow her extraordinary and controversial life. The child was born prematurely, frail, and apparently doomed amid a cholera epidemic sweeping the region. Her mother, Helena Andreevna Hahn von Rottenstern, only 17 at the time, contracted the disease shortly after giving birth. Against all medical expectations, both mother and daughter survived, an early sign of the inexplicable events that would mark Helena's entire existence. The baptism in the Russian Orthodox Church was marked by an ominous omen. The priest's vestment caught fire from a candle, as if anticipating the fervent opposition she would show toward religious dogmatism throughout her life. Helena belonged to an aristocratic lineage of notable intellectual distinction. Her father, Pyotr Alexeyevich Hahn von Rottenstern, descended from the German noble family Hahn and served as a captain in the Imperial Russian artillery, later attaining the rank of colonel. The family's roots were Russian, German, and French, including a French Huguenot ancestor who fled religious persecution in France to serve at the court of Catherine the Great. Peter wasn't present at his daughter's birth. He was in Poland, helping suppress the November uprising against Russian rule, and met her only when she was 6 months old. Her maternal lineage was equally impressive. Her mother was the daughter of Princess Yelena Pavlovna Dolgorukaya, an aristocrat who was also self-taught, and the family traced its descent to the ancient Russian princes, the Rurikids. Helena's maternal grandmother, Elena Pavlovna, was a renowned self-taught botanist and a woman of extraordinary learning. Helena's mother became a notable writer, publishing novels under the pen name Zenaida Arva and translating works by the English novelist Edward Bulwer-Lytton for Russian publication. This rich intellectual and artistic heritage clearly shaped Helena's formation. Helena's early years were marked by constant moves due to her father's military career. The family often relocated to different parts of the empire, accompanied by their servants. That nomadic childhood likely influenced Blavatsky's widely nomadic lifestyle later on. 1 year after Pyotr arrived in Ekaterinoslav, the family moved to the nearby military town of Romankovo. When Helena was 2, her younger brother Sasha died in another garrison town after no medical help could be found. In 1835, mother and daughter moved to Odessa, where Blavatsky's maternal grandfather, Andrei Fadeyev, a civil administrator for the imperial authorities, had recently been appointed. It was in this city that Helena's sister, Vera Petrovna, was born. The family later moved to St. Petersburg in 1836, where her mother established her literary career. When Pyotr returned to Ukraine around 1837, she remained in the city to continue her intellectual work. Helena's life took a formative turn. When the family accompanied Fadeyev to Astrakhan, where he had been appointed to administer the Kalmyk peoples of Central Asia. There, Helena had her first significant contact with Tibetan Buddhism through her friendship with a Kalmyk leader named Tumen. The Kalmyks practiced Tibetan Buddhism, and this early exposure to Eastern spiritual traditions planted seeds that would blossom decades later in her theosophical work. In 1838, Helena's mother moved with her daughters to join her husband in Poltava, where she taught Helena to play the piano and arranged dance lessons. Due to failing health, Helena's mother returned to Odessa, where Helena learned English with a British governess. They then moved to Saratov, where a brother, Leonid, was born in June 1840. The family went to Poland and later back to Odessa, where Helena's mother died of tuberculosis in June 1842, at 28 years old. This devastating loss left a permanent mark on Helena, then only 11. Just imagine losing your mother at 11 and rarely seeing your father because he was always working. That was Blavatsky's early pain. From a young age, she found refuge in books and in the spiritual. After her mother's death, the 3 surviving children were sent to live with their maternal grandparents in Saratov, where her grandfather Andrei had been appointed governor. It was during the Saratov period that Helena began to manifest her first paranormal experiences and to cultivate a vivid interest in Esotericism. She received a refined education in French, art, and music, disciplines meant to prepare young aristocratic women for marriage. And by 11, she was fluent in French and Russian, with some English learned from the British governess in Odessa. With her grandparents, she spent holidays at Tumen's Kalmyk summer camp, where she learned to ride horses and picked up a few words of Tibetan. That frequent contact with Tibetan Buddhist culture would deepen her enduring connection to Eastern spiritual traditions. Rumor has it, she discovered the personal library of her maternal great-grandfather, Prince Pavel Vasilievich Dolgorukov, who died in 1838. The library contained a variety of books on esoteric subjects, encouraging her burgeoning interest in the occult. Some sources say Dolgorukov had been initiated into Freemasonry in the late 1770s and belonged to the strict observance rite. Helena later claimed that during this period, she began to experience visions in which she encountered a mysterious Indian, a figure she said she would meet later in the flesh. Her rebellious, independent nature became increasingly evident as she grew. Helena rejected the conventional social expectations for women of her time, refusing to conform to traditionally submissive roles. Her connection to truth and purpose was too strong to bow to social convention. She was known for her fiery temperament and stubbornness, traits that would accompany her throughout her life. At 17, in a defiant act that would set the tone for the rest of her life, Helena agreed to marry Nikifor Vladimirovich Blavatsky, a man in his 40s who worked as vice-governor of the province of Erivan. Her reasons were unclear. The marriage took place on July 7, 1849, but Helena tried to back out shortly before the ceremony. Helena had no feelings for her husband, seeing marriage simply as an escape from a stifling family life. She insisted on remaining a virgin and refused to consummate the union. After moving with him to the Sardar Palace, she made repeated unsuccessful attempts to escape and return to her family in Tiflis. Bored and increasingly frustrated by Nikifor's attempts to overcome her resolve, Helena fled on a ship bound for Turkey. The marriage lasted only 3 months. The family sent Helena, accompanied by a manservant and a maid, to Odessa to meet her father, who planned to return with her to St. Petersburg. Her escorts accompanied her as far as Poti and then Kerch, intending to continue with her to Odessa. Helena claimed that, fleeing her escorts and bribing the captain of the ship that had taken her to Kirk, she reached Constantinople. That dramatic escape, allegedly bribing the ship's captain, marked the beginning of 9 years of world travel, possibly financed by her father. Yes, at just 17, Helena Blavatsky ran away, leaving everything and everyone behind without looking back. This bold flight and the rejection of marriage launched an extraordinary period in Helena's life. Instead of returning to the comfort of conventional family life, she embarked on an irrepressible spiritual journey to fulfill the dharma of her life as a servant and messenger of her guru and master. For 25 years, from 17 to 41, she traveled through many countries of the world. Much of the record of those travels comes from Helena herself, as she was alone most of the time. Now try to picture it. A woman in the year 1850, traveling alone across the world, without a set destination, without fear, guided only by instinct and inner voice. During those years, she crisscrossed the globe tirelessly, educating herself, maturing and training courageously in the most remote and hidden centers of occult practice, mystical study, and esoteric learning. The following years were marked by extraordinary journeys that took her across Europe, the Americas, and Asia. According to biographer Peter Washington, from this point on, myth and reality begin to merge seamlessly in Helena's biography. By her later accounts, Helena said she traveled throughout Europe, visited Egypt, Greece, Asia Minor, and reached London in 1851. It was in Hyde Park, London, that she claimed to have her first physical encounter with the mysterious Indian from her childhood visions. This meeting would change the course of her life. The man, whom she would later identify as her master Morya, was a member of an Indian or Nepalese delegation in London for a time. When she saw him, a tall Hindu, she immediately recognized him as the one who had appeared frequently to her in visions on the astral plane, that is, in a non-corporeal astral form. Morya revealed to her that she was to found the Theosophical Society and told her to travel to Tibet to prepare for that important task. In that moment, everything made sense to her. Would you have the courage to accept such an invitation from someone you had supposedly only met in dreams? Tell me in the comments. Blavatsky didn't think twice before setting out to follow him. Following her master's instructions, Helena embarked on even more extensive world travels. She claimed she sailed to Canada in late 1851 and then to the United States, where she visited Texas, New Orleans, Mexico, Central and South America, and the West Indies. Rounding the Cape of Good Hope and Ceylon, she reached India in 1852. Her first attempt to enter Tibet was prevented by a British resident in Nepal. In 1853, Helena Blavatsky left the Middle East and arrived directly in England, where she faced hostility for being a Russian citizen during the Crimean War. In 1854, she left for the United States, lived in New York and Chicago, and joined a caravan that crossed the Rocky Mountains to San Francisco. Between leaving India and arriving in England in 1853 to 54, she said she survived a shipwreck near the Cape of Good Hope. Once in London, she claimed she worked as a concert performer at the Royal Philharmonic Society before returning to America, visiting New York, Chicago, Salt Lake City, and San Francisco. In 1855, 1856, Blavatsky traveled through Asia, Japan, and Singapore, then back to India through Kashmir, Ladakh, and Burma. During that phase, she made a brief entry into Tibet via Leh, although only for a few weeks. In 1857, she returned to Europe, crossing Java on the way, and arrived in Russia in 1858 to reunite with family. In the early 1860s, she and her sister went to Tiflis to visit their maternal grandmother. In 1862, she reconciled with Nikifor Blavatsky, and they adopted little Yuri, who died in 1867 at 5 years old. In 1864, she fell from a horse in Mingrelia, suffered a spinal fracture, and remained in a coma for months. Upon waking, she said her psychic powers had been heightened. Recovered, Helena passed through Italy, Transylvania, and Serbia, where she possibly studied Kabbalah, and in 1867, traveled through the Balkans and Hungary, returning to Italy to stay in Venice, Florence, and Mentana, where she said she fought and was wounded alongside Giuseppe Garibaldi. In 1868, invited by her master Morya in Constantinople, she began the great overland journey across Turkey, Persia, and Afghanistan to India, entering Tibet via Kashmir. From 1868 to December 1870, Blavatsky claimed to have lived at Tashi Lunpo Monastery, where she said she was instructed by Morya and Kut Humi, two masters of Indian origin fluent in English and French. Although Blavatsky said she personally knew the Mahatmas Morya and Coulomb. There are no independent records or evidence that confirm these figures outside theosophical circles. What is known about them comes almost entirely from Blavatsky's own accounts and the testimonies of her followers. At the end of 1870, she left Tibet, visited Syria, Palestine, and Lebanon, met with the Druze, and in July 1872 returned to Odessa. In April 1873, she set out for Europe via Bucharest and Paris, and on her way to the United States arrived in New York on July 8, 1873, at 41 years old. She settled on the Lower East Side, supporting herself as a seamstress and card designer, and was interviewed by Anna Ballard of the Sun newspaper, which documented for the first time her claims about Tibet. After that, several landmark events followed in her life. In December 1873, she received news of her father's death and inherited a fortune, moving into a luxury hotel. In 1874, she symbolically married the Georgian Mikhail Bedinelli but refused to consummate the union, and he filed for divorce upon returning to Georgia. Also in 1874, during investigations of mediumistic phenomena in Chittenden, Vermont, she met Colonel Henry Steele Olcott, with whom she formed a strong friendship and began conducting demonstrations of occult phenomena in broad daylight, distinguishing herself from spiritualist mediums. On September 7, 1875, at 44, Helena hosted a lecture by George H. Felt on the lost canon of proportion. At that initial gathering, the decision was made to found the Theosophical Society. The formal assembly took place on November 17, 1875, at Mott Memorial Hall, where Henry Olcott was elected president and William Q. Judge, secretary, consolidating a movement that aimed to unite philosophy, occult science, and universal brotherhood. The term Theosophy comes from Greek, theos, God, or divine, and Sophia, wisdom. Literally, it means divine wisdom, or knowledge of God. In 1877, at 46, Helena published her first major work, Isis Unveiled, which caused an immediate sensation. The book that came out as Isis Unveiled did not intend to reveal the mysteries of nature, but to make known to the world the existence of a once universal wisdom religion now hidden from view. Symbolic Isis, the wisdom religion, is veiled, having been lost to the world for long ages, but it exists. Isis Unveiled is divided into 2 volumes. Volume 1, The Infallibility of Modern Science, discusses occult, science and the hidden unknown forces of nature, exploring topics such as forces, elementals, psychic phenomena, and the inner and outer man. Volume 2, Theology, discusses the similarity of Christian scriptures to Eastern religions such as Buddhism, Hinduism, the Vedas, and Zoroastrianism. It follows the Renaissance notion of Prisca Theologia, in which all these religions supposedly descend from a common source, the ancient wisdom religion. The success of Isis Unveiled was extraordinary. Now, the work went through 3 printings of 1,000 copies each in the year it was published and has since sold 500,000 copies. Although the work was often criticized as plagiarized, with scholars noting how Helena copied extensively from sources popular among occultists of the time. Isis Unveiled is also understood by modern scholars as a landmark in the history of Western esotericism. In 1879, the main founders, Madame Blavatsky and Colonel Olcott, moved to India, where the society spread rapidly. They were also eager to study Eastern religions, which were included in the society's agenda. Helena and Olcott arrived in India in February 1879 and initially established their headquarters in Bombay. In 1882, they established the society's international headquarters at Adyar, near Madras, now Chennai. The Adyar property became the society's permanent headquarters. Several rooms were reserved for Helena, who moved into them in December. She continued to travel across the subcontinent, claiming she spent time in Sikkim and Tibet, where she visited her teacher's ashram for a few days. During this period in India, Helena was at the height of her powers and fame. She regularly displayed paranormal phenomena that impressed visitors and followers. Witnesses described appearances of the masters at the Adyar headquarters. It was a household custom for the workers to gather on the flat roof at night, and from time to time a master would visibly come there and graciously converse with them and instruct them. But it was also during this period that Helena faced her greatest controversies. In February 1884, Helena and H.S. Olcott traveled to Europe. After their departure, a conflict between the Coulombs and the Theosophical Society escalated. Emma and Alexis Coulomb, whom Helena had met in Cairo in 1871 and whom she had helped when they were in financial trouble in Sri Lanka in 1879, attempted to blackmail and threaten Helena. She fired them, and when Theosophists inspected Helena's room after the Coulombs had to leave, they found secret doors in her room. After being dismissed, the Coulombs went to their friends, the Free Church of Scotland missionaries, and turned over letters allegedly written by Helena to Emma. These letters suggested Helena was a fraud. Chaplain George Patterson published excerpts in the Madras Christian College magazine. The incident became widely known throughout India and also in America and Europe. The Society for Psychical Research, SPR, in London sent Richard Hodgson to India to investigate the allegations. In December 1885, the SPR published the Hodgson Report, which concluded that Helena was one of the most accomplished, ingenious, and interesting impostors in history. The report accused Helena of gross fraud and imposture, and also alleged she was a spy for the Russian government. The impact of the Hodgson report was devastating for Helena's reputation. It caused great tension within the society, and several of Helena's followers, among them Babaji and Subarao, denounced her and resigned from the organization on its basis. However, a century later, in 1986, Dr. Vernon Harrison, a handwriting expert and former president of the Royal Photographic Society, published a detailed study of the Hodgson report in the SPR's own journal. Harrison's analysis was devastating for the original report's credibility. He concluded that the Hodgson report was a highly partisan document, losing any claim to scientific impartiality. Harrison showed that the report is riddled with biased statements, conjectures presented as fact or probable fact, uncorroborated testimony from unnamed witnesses, cherry-picked evidence, and outright falsehood. He also demonstrated that Hodgson was prepared to use any evidence, however trivial or questionable, to implicate HPB, and he ignored all evidence that could be used in her favor. Deteriorating health led Helena to contemplate returning to Europe's milder climate. Resigning her position as the Society's corresponding secretary, she left India in March 1885. Settling in Naples, Italy, in April 1885, she began living on a small pension from the Society and continued working on her next book, The Secret Doctrine. She then moved to Würzburg in the Kingdom of Bavaria, where she was visited by a Swedish theosophist, Countess Constance Wachtmeister, who would become her constant companion for the rest of her life. In 1886, by then using a wheelchair, Helena moved to Ostend in Belgium, where she was visited by theosophists from across Europe. Supplementing her pension, she started a small ink-making business. In September 1887, she moved into the Holland Park home of fellow theosophists Bertram Keightley and his nephew Archibald Keightley. In London, Helena founded a magazine, controversially titling it Lucifer. In that theosophical publication, she sought to ignore the allegations about paranormal phenomena and focus instead on discussing philosophical ideas. It was also in London that she completed her masterpiece, The Secret Doctrine. The Secret Doctrine was begun in 1884 as a revision of Helena's Isis Unveiled, 1877. In January 1885, her teachers outlined plans for a new book. Volume 1 of The Secret Doctrine came off the press on October 20th, 1888, and Volume 2 was published at the end of December 1888, or in January 1889. The Secret Doctrine, a book of 171 pages, was published simultaneously in America and England. Volume 1, Cosmogenesis, deals with the birth of universes, suns, planets, and their realms, elemental, mineral, Vegetable, Animal, Human, and Spiritual. Volume 2, Anthropogenesis, covers the origin, evolution, and destiny of humanity. Both volumes are based on the archaic stanzas of Jian and contain sections analyzing and interpreting symbolism and contrasting science with ancient wisdom. Helena states the book's purpose in the preface: to show that nature is not a fortuitous concurrence of atoms, to give man his rightful place in the scheme of the universe, to rescue from degradation the archaic truths that are the basis of all religions, and to uncover, to some extent, the fundamental unity from which they all spring. During her final years in London, Helena became the center of a memorable circle of talented individuals. Despite the controversies surrounding her, she continued to attract devoted followers and exert significant influence on the spiritual thought of the era. George R.S. Mead, the Gnostic scholar who was Helena's private secretary for the last 3 years of her life, provided powerful testimony about her integrity. Mead wrote that when he came to work for her, she handed him responsibility for all her keys, her manuscripts, her writing desk, and the nests of drawers where she kept her most private papers. Not only that, but under the pretext of being left in peace to write, she flatly refused to be bothered with her mail and made him take over her voluminous correspondence, and that too, without reading it first herself. Mead concluded that whatever else HPB might have been, she was not a cheat or a swindler. She had nothing to hide. In the winter of 1890, Britain was struck by an influenza epidemic, the global pandemic of 1889 to 1890, and Helena contracted the virus. She died in the afternoon on May 8, 1891, at Annie Besant's home in London. Her last words, recorded by Theosophist Isabel Cooper Oakley, were, "Isabel, Isabel, keep the link unbroken. Do not let my last incarnation be a failure." Her body was cremated at Woking Crematorium on May 11th. That date has been commemorated by Theosophists ever since as White Lotus Day. Helena Petrovna Blavatsky died at 59, famous worldwide as one of the most unconventional and extravagant women of her time. Although she was the only one to gain international fame, independent women were common in her family. Her mother rose to prominence in Russia as a feminist author in the 1840s, and her grandmother was a self-taught botanist, both living in ways that challenged contemporary ideas about proper behavior for women. Helena's personality was a study in contrasts. She was described as having a swarthy, Tartar aspect, piercing eyes, and was known for incessantly smoking hand-rolled cigarettes and for frequent salty language. She said her manners were like those of a Prussian grenadier on leave. Despite those seemingly rough edges, she was also described as highly charismatic and indefatigable. Throughout her life, Helena demonstrated an extraordinary range of psychic abilities. Witnesses described instances of clairvoyance, telepathy, and even the ability to manipulate physical objects through psychokinesis. These reported abilities ranged from foreseeing future events to communicating with spirits and manifesting physical objects seemingly out of thin air. One of the paranormal abilities Helena most often used was materialization and dematerialization, power focused on making objects appear or disappear. Yet Helena's approach to her own psychic abilities was complex. She often expressed skepticism toward public displays, believing Theosophy should stand on its own merits rather than on sensational phenomena. In her own words, if Theosophy cannot assert and maintain its authority by the soundness and beneficence of its principles, it would be useless to try to prop it up by the display of phenomena. Helena's influence on the development of modern spirituality and esotericism is hard to overstate. She is widely regarded as the grandmother of the New Age, although she had numerous objections to many New Age teachers and their followers. Concepts like reincarnation, karma, the self-directed evolution of the soul, and many others that she introduced into the cultural conversation lost their elitist associations and became part of our everyday reservoir of ideas. As the American spiritual philosopher Manly P. Hall observed, occultism, in the Western world, owes all that it is to the pioneering of H.P. Blavatsky. Her tireless efforts are responsible in no small measure for the freedom and tolerance granted to metaphysical speculation in this century. Remove H.P. Blavatsky, and the structure of modern occultism collapses like a house of cards. Helena Blavatsky's life was an extraordinary journey across the boundaries of social convention, spiritual exploration, and intellectual provocation. From her aristocratic birth in Ukraine to her death as one of the most influential figures in Western esotericism, she consistently defied the norms of her time and opened new pathways for spiritual thought. Her courage in rejecting an unwanted marriage at 17, her alleged travels through the most remote corners of the world in search of ancient wisdom, and her determination to establish a movement that bridged East and West all mark her as a truly revolutionary figure. Helena Petrovna Blavatsky's literary output was vast, ambitious, and deeply influential. Her works form the foundation of modern Theosophy and have endured for generations as indispensable references for scholars and spiritual seekers worldwide. Blavatsky not only wrote monumental books, she also founded and edited periodicals that carried her thought and that of other theosophists. Main books: Isis Unveiled, 1877, published in 2 volumes, Volume 1, The Infallibility of Modern Science. Volume 2, Theology. The work denounces the limitations of materialist science and dogmatic religions, proposing a universal wisdom religion. It was Blavatsky's first major publishing success and established her name as an esoteric author. The Secret Doctrine, 1888, also divided into 2 volumes. Cosmogenesis, On the Origin of the Universe, based on the stanzas of Jian. Anthropogenesis, On the Origin and Evolution of Humanity. Considered her masterpiece, it integrates science, religion, and philosophy, presenting an esoteric view of the history and constitution of the cosmos and the human being. The Key to Theosophy, 1889. Written in a question-and-answer format, this book explains the fundamental principles of Theosophy clearly and directly. It is considered one of the best introductions to the Theosophical system. The Voice of the Silence, 1889. A short, mystical, poetic work that Blavatsky said she translated from a Tibetan manuscript. Focused on inner spiritual practice and the path of the Bodhisattva, it emphasizes silence, compassion, and wisdom. Articles and shorter works. Blavatsky also wrote dozens of doctrinal articles, letters, and essays, many compiled after her death. Collected writings, 14 volumes, organized by Boris Dezirkov. A vast collection of articles, essays, correspondence, and doctrinal commentary written by Blavatsky between 1874 and 1891. These texts cover practical occultism, comparative philosophy, symbolism, mythology, esoteric science, yoga, and critiques of institutionalized religions. 5 Years of Theosophy, 1885. A collection of articles published in the Theosophist, including texts by Blavatsky and other important theosophists, with her commentary on psychic phenomena, karma, reincarnation, and religious symbolism. Periodicals founded or edited by Blavatsky. The Theosophist, 1880, present. Founded by Blavatsky and Olcott in Adyar, India, it was the Society's first official journal. Blavatsky served as editor in the early years and contributed numerous articles on Theosophy, Hinduism, Buddhism, Eastern culture, and occultism. Lucifer, 1887-1891, founded by Blavatsky in London in collaboration with Mabel Collins and other European members. Despite the provocative title, the magazine aimed to restore the original meaning of the word Lucifer as light-bearer. It covered philosophy, spirituality, science, ethics, and mysticism, and was one of Blavatsky's preferred platforms for intellectual debate. The Path, contributor, edited by William Q., judge in the United States. Blavatsky frequently contributed texts and doctrinal letters. Letters and correspondence. The Mahatma Letters to A.P. Sinnett, published posthumously. Blavatsky is considered an intermediary in the communication between the masters and members of the Theosophical Society. Although controversial, these letters are fundamental to understanding esoteric cosmology and the doctrine of the Mahatmas. Blavatsky's letters to her disciples, private correspondence revealing human and instructive aspects of her spiritual leadership and doctrinal vision. Blavatsky brought esotericism out of the ghetto and into dialogue with the educated culture of the West. By popularizing ideas like karma, reincarnation, the evolution of consciousness, and the notion of a perennial wisdom behind religions, she reopened channels between spirituality, philosophy, and science. Whether or not one accepts her claims, Blavatsky was a turning point, helping transform esoteric curiosity into a program of study and ethical practice. The theosophical foundations that propelled knowledge, universal brotherhood. More than a moral ideal, it became a research criterion. Compare traditions without ranking them, recognizing the value in each culture. This pushed comparative religious studies and intercultural dialogue forward. Comparative study of religion, philosophy, and science theosophy treated these fields as complementary windows. This methodological pluralism encouraged cross-readings, myth, symbol, rite, cosmology, and normalized interdisciplinarity before it became academic fashion. Investigation of the unexplained laws of nature and the latent powers in the human being. It proposed an empirical, critical stance toward anomalous phenomena without automatic reductionism. Even amid controversy, this fueled debates in the psychology of the extraordinary, consciousness studies, and parapsychology. Perennial wisdom, prisca theologia, the idea of a common core. Behind religions offered a hermeneutic method. Seek patterns, archetypes, and correspondences across myths and doctrines. This re-elevated symbols as a source of knowledge. Evolution of consciousness. It expanded the concept of evolution beyond the biological. Mind and consciousness also evolve in cycles. This view influenced philosophical and psychological readings of spiritual experience, karma and reincarnation as moral causality. Brought to a broad Western audience, these ideas offered an ethic of responsibility, cause and effect, and a horizon of continuous self-improvement, shaping practices and spiritual debates to this day. 7 principles of the human being and planes of existence. Although speculative, they provided an operational map for contemplative practice and symbolic reading of the self, body, energy, mind, spirit, guiding schools of self-knowledge and integrative therapies. East-West bridge through texts, lectures, and theosophical journals. Eastern sources, Hinduism, Buddhism, Vedanta, circulated widely, and Western currents, Gnosis, Hermeticism, Kabbalah, were reintroduced within a unified framework of study. Although controversies about the authenticity of her psychic phenomena and the veracity of some biographical claims continue to this day, her profound and lasting impact on Western spiritual thought cannot be denied. She pioneered the introduction of Eastern concepts like karma and reincarnation to Western audiences, created a unique synthesis of science, religion, and philosophy, and established a movement that continues to influence spiritual seekers worldwide more than a century after her death. Helena Petrovna Blavatsky remains one of the most enigmatic and influential figures in modern history. A woman who lived many lives in a single lifetime, challenged the conventions of her time, and left a legacy that continues to inspire and provoke debate. Her life was, as she herself might have said, a living demonstration that there is no religion higher than truth. To close this video on a high note, I want to ask you something directly. If Helena Blavatsky's story sparked new reflections in you, if it challenged your mind and touched your soul, don't let this knowledge stay only with you. Click like right now, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next videos we're preparing with the same care and depth. Share this content in groups, on your social networks, and with friends who also seek to understand the mysteries of life and spirituality. Every action you take strengthens this egregore of seekers and helps keep the flame of truth alive. YouTube's algorithm recognizes the value of this work when you participate, and your support ensures more people gain access to this knowledge. Be part of this mission. Like, share, comment, and subscribe. The next chapter of this journey is on the way, and I want you with me. And swing by our profile. There are many videos on these same topics for you to binge.